5.2 phase shifts and vertical shifts with the graphs of sine and cosine. Um, so we've moved the cosine up and down a little bit. We've changed the period. We've multiplied by putting a number on the outside, which then makes it go up either higher or lower. We haven't gone left or right yet. Now, a left or right shift is called a phase shift. Sorry, that's not what I wanted. So where it says phase shift over here, this would be a left to right shift. So let's look at an example here. What if I wanted to graph the sine of x minus pi over 2? Well, what we're going to try to do is force this equation here to go through the sort of the same pattern as all the other sines and cosines we've graphed so far. So ultimately, it is this line over here that I still will want to say exactly what it said in the past, and that would be that the sine should start at 0, then go to 1, back at 0, negative 1, and then be back at 0. So the way that you do that would be to start with the value of x, in this case, that would make it say 0. So, and then we want to end at 2 pi. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to say, well, let's solve the inequality. We want x minus pi over 2. We want it to start at 0, and we want it to end at 2 pi. So then you just solve this inequality. So if I add pi over 2 on both sides, then I get pi over 2 here is less than or equal to x is less than or equal, and 2 pi could be written as 4 pi over 2, and 4 plus 1 pi over 2 is 5 pi over 2. So in terms of my table, the value I have right over here, this is the start of the table, and the value that I have over here, this will be the end of my table. And I'm not sure I can fit this in over here, but so this is supposed to be the start at pi over 2, and then I need to end at 5 pi over 2. Okay, so then we need to divide this into 4 equal steps, and well, we haven't done anything with the period, so normally the sine and the cosine have a period of 2 pi, right? So if the period is still 2 pi, which it is, and we multiply by 1/4, then we're still going to count by pi over 2. So 1 pi over 2 plus pi over 2 is 2 pi over 2, which would just be pi. And then we get 3 pi over 2. And then the next one would be 4 pi over 2, which would be 2 pi. And then 5 pi over 2. So let's see what happens. If I do x minus pi over 2, and I use pi over 2 for the first one, so I would get pi over 2 minus pi over 2. So that would be actually, that's like asking a value of 0, and the sign of 0 is 0. Okay, and then you go to the next one. So the next one, say plug in pi. So what do you get when you use pi minus pi over 2? Well, pi minus pi over 2 is pi over 2. And at pi over 2, we know that the sign is 1. And so what you see here is that here is the pattern of values that we would like to see for the x's, because every time we're just going to subtract pi over 2. So 3 pi over 2 minus pi over 2 was pi. 2 pi minus pi over 2 is 3 pi over 2, and 5 pi over 2 minus pi over 2 would have been 2 pi. Now this line, I usually don't put in the table at all, because we do all this work up front. So all this work that I have over here, I'm going to do all that work so that I can fill in the top line and then immediately go to my pattern. Okay, so now I need to graph it. So we're going to count by pi over 2, so that's 1 pi over 2, and that's actually going to be the start. So that's 2 pi over 2, 3 pi over 2, 4 pi over 2, and then 5 pi over 2. We want this sign to start at 0, then we're going to make it go to 1, then back to 0, then go to a negative 1, and then back to 0. Now the pattern tells you that if for every pi over 2, you go either up or down 1. So this dot here, I can find it by sort of inferencing, and I am going to include it in this case. It's not always needed to have it there, but in this case, it was so easy to find. So that is the final graph. Now I missed the dot over here, so we'll make it a little bit bigger. And then I need a little bit of markings. So let's see, I'll mark the last one here. That's 5 pi over 2. And then this one was 3 pi over 2. Okay, because the table supports all of the points as well. Okay. The next thing is that we have seen some shifts up and down. So I'm going to do one more of these. So this number over here is going to shift the graph up, right? So this is a shift up where the phase shift was left to right. And then remember what the 4 does. So the 4 is going to take the period, which used to be 2 pi, and divide it by 4. So this graph only needs to go from 0 to pi over 2. So we're going to start at 0, and we're going to end at pi over 2. We're going to count by, well, let's see, we multiply by 1 over 4, so we're going to count by pi over 8. So this should be 1 pi over 8, 2 pi over 8, which is pi over 4, 3 pi over 8, and then 4 pi over 8, which would be pi over 2. So then we get the line that we want. We want a 0, 0, 1, 0, negative 1, and 0 here. And then this 2 just adds 2. So it's up 2 for everything. So 2, 3, 2, 1, and 2. So your graph would look like this. So 0, pi over 8, pi over 4, 3 pi over 8, pi over 2. And we're going to go 1, 2, 3. So this one starts at 2, goes to 3, back at 2, then the 1, 8. Sorry, I messed up. Let me go back. We need to start at 0, right? At 0, we're at 2. At pi over 8, we're at 3. And then we're at 2 again. And then we're at 1. And then we are at 2 again. So the graph looks a little like this. Hopefully your curves look a little better than mine. Okay. And then some markings. So in this case, pi over 2 and pi over 4, 1, 2, and 3. All right, let's do an example where we get a whole bunch of stuff. So generally what we want to do is we want to look at a phase shift first. Do we have an addition or a subtraction on the inside? So yes, we do. So we need to worry about that first. Then we have a change in amplitude. Yep. And do we have a vertical shift here? So yes. So the only thing that I don't have listed in here is we don't have a period change here. Now you are responsible for knowing how to graph something with a period change. It's just that for us, if I do a phase shift, I will not also do a period change because there's another trick to that, and I don't want to do that this year with you. I'll do that in pre-cal. So period changes and phase shifts, you do have to know both, but you don't have to know how to do one of those or both of those at the same time. Okay, so let's find the phase shift here. So x plus pi is in the middle, okay, and we would like that to end at 2 pi, and we would like that to actually start at 0. So the way that you solve this is by subtracting pi on both sides. So 0 minus pi is a negative pi, then we get x over here, and 2 pi minus pi is just pi. So this graph will start at a negative pi. So this is the start, and then it will end at pi. We need to find a period and the count by. Well, I told you guys that we would be nice, or I would be nice. So the period for this one is 2 pi. It still does come from the number in front of the x, so I'm just going to focus on this part over here. So notice that that would be 1x plus pi. Okay, so this number is still, that 1 is still what you would divide by here. So 2 pi over 1 is still 2 pi. We're going to multiply by 1 over 4, so we end up counting by pi over 2's. So this is my count by. Okay. And then make a table. All right, so let's make a table. I'd like to have a straight line for this one. So I need a little more room over here. So this is my first point, second point, third point, fourth point, and then a finishing point. And so what do we have? So this is x, right? We're going to start at a negative pi, and we're going to add pi over 2. So think of a negative pi as a negative 2 pi over 2. So negative 2 pi over 2 plus pi over 2 would be a negative 1 pi over 2. So this is a negative pi over 2. Plus pi over 2 is 0. Plus pi over 2 is pi over 2. Plus pi over 2 is pi. So what I've accomplished at this point is to help set up this part. So the sign of x plus pi is going to start at 0, then go to 1, then go back to 0, go to negative 1, and go to 0. And then the next thing says, so this is called the amplitude change. We're going to multiply all those values by 2. So 0, 2, 0, negative 2, and 0. And then the last thing is the vertical shift. So it says what, negative 1? So we're going to go a negative 1 plus 2 times the sign of x plus pi. That's an x. So subtract 1 from everything. So negative 1, 1, negative 1, negative 3, negative 1. And then we need to graph that. So we actually started at a negative pi. So I need a little bit of space both to the left and to the right. And so if that's a negative pi over 2, that's a negative pi. Negative pi over 2, 0, pi over 2, and pi. And we're going to start at a negative 1. So we're going to start right there. That means that I should probably erase this. Sorry, it's taking a while. So at a negative pi, we're going to start at a negative 1. I'm going to go up to 1, back to a negative 1, down to a negative 3, and then up to a negative 1 again. So I'll just mark that one over here. So negative pi. And then we graph. So put some of these on over here. And let's check. So yep. And then that would be it. Okay. Thanks.